Good afternoon, everyone. It's a packed house. Well done. Hey, if there is a seat next to you and you can make room, there's a few people standing in the back. Try and squeeze down into the middle. It'll help. We can get some of the standing folks to sit down. Glad you're so excited. I'm really excited for Sherif's talk. Sherif is our principal product manager, our lead product manager for Confluence. He spoke last year. You're probably really familiar with him at this point. A good friend of mine. We've worked together for about 5 years. A fun fact about Sherif is that he is admittedly the ultimate carnivore. He's eaten zebra meat, giraffe meat, lion meat. I think there was one more I'm forgetting, and maybe he can clarify when he gets up here. But let's give him a round of applause. Come on up, Sherif.
There is a story behind the meat. It sounds like I'm like an evil person that just hunts animals. It's not the case. I grew up in Kenya in Africa, and there's a restaurant there called Carnivores. It's a very touristy thing to do, and you go there and you can try some of the game meats. They look after the animals there. It's not bad. So that's what they told me. Thanks for coming, everyone. As Ryan said, I'm a principal product manager on the Confluence team. Really excited to be here at Atlassian, sharing with you guys some stories for us from Atlassian. So today we're going to talk about PM and engineering, how we can work better together. Such an important relationship out of all the teams that work in software, arguably one of the most important relationships that you have well gelled and working well together within your team. And when you hear a title like this, a PM and developer walk into a bar, I wonder what you're thinking. So you're probably thinking like, this awesome punchline is coming. I'm sorry, I don't have one. Or you're thinking like something big is going to go down, like some action, maybe like they're kind of like superheroes. I was thinking maybe like Batman and Robin walk into a bar. I don't know if that really works. Batman's kind of like the main superhero and Robin is his sidekick. So does that work? I don't know. We kind of think PM and developers are supposed to be equal, right? So that doesn't really work. Or maybe it's Mario and Luigi walk into a bar. If they walk into a bar, I don't know what happens. Maybe like a corn cup pops out of the bar stool. I don't know, something like that. But again, Mario is still kind of like the lead hero, you could argue, right? So I was thinking it's more a bit like Captain America and the Hulk. I'll let you take a guess which one's Captain America, which one's the Hulk, or maybe, I don't know, you can work it out in your mind. But I guess they're both equals. When they walk into a bar, something big's going to go down. They're both working together. They're both heroes, right? So what I want to talk to you about today is how Captain America and the Hulk can work better together. The reason I want to share this with you is the truth is, some of you know, or some of you may not know, I used to be an engineer. I was what they call 10x engineer. I'm kidding, by the way. And I kind of conquered engineering. I did everything there was to do in engineering, and I moved to product management. So I can give you 3 practical tips that you can get engineers to build whatever you like. And so today I'm going to go through 3 tips on how you can achieve just this. Now, the first and most important tip is remember that you represent the customer. And if we believe customers are an important livelihood to your business, then that must mean that you are the most important person in the organization, right? You've got all these customers, and they're just relying on you to represent them. So don't stuff it up. There's a lot of pressure on you. But if we believe they are important, then that must mean product management is important, right? So what does that mean? You should walk around the office and make sure people are aware of your importance, right? So when you see an engineer doing something like this, they're not in the zone. They're just pretending to be in the zone. Your customers are far more important than engineers with headphones on. And they always worry about interruptions. Forget about interruptions. They need to know how important you are because you are representing the customer. Now, what happens when you have your attention and you're like, you've tapped them on the shoulder and they take their headphones off? I suggest using motivational one-liners that you need to have in your toolbox, ready, prepared, to kind of, earn respect. Now, I'll give you a few of these examples. Let's say you're in a planning meeting and it says to you, this is going to be really hard. It's over 20, 30 story points. It's going to be a lot of work. I always like to drop a line like this. Isn't it just loops and bars? Surely it can't be that hard, right? Or show them some empathy. Show them that you understand where they're coming from. Yeah, I used to code. And I know exactly what it's like. If they still look puzzled, you need to give them something to inspire them, something to pump them up, right? They told me we had the world's best engineering team. Isn't that the case? And so some people struggle to relate with that. So I often like to use examples as product managers or jobs to give them examples of how engineers can relate to things. So I use a small software company in the States to give an example. I've seen Google do it. If you've got a few engineers working on some problems, I don't see why we can't do it. Let's say they eventually come around to you and they like your idea or whatever, or they say something to you that you don't quite understand in response to something you've said. I always like to drop this line. Let's take a step back and then say exactly what you said, but just a little bit slower. And then they usually get it the second time around. Now, let's say they finally come around and they have some ideas and they're excited about your idea and they give you some more ideas. Now, no matter what idea you get from an engineer, you always got to take it to the next level. Let's say you're walking past some engineers and they're working well together, or they're struggling. Suggest that maybe they do some pair programming, maybe they need some help, or they're in the middle of a classic example, they're in the middle of a story and they find something that we haven't thought about, like, oh, but we haven't thought about this scenario. Now, this is my favorite one. Definitely have this in the back of your wallet. You may not understand exactly what they're saying, but we don't really need to address whatever it is they're saying. So I always like to drop this line. Now, they probably don't know phase 2 is never going to happen. Don't tell them that. But we'll get to it at some point. But I hope you can see I've just done a bunch of anti-patterns of things never to say. Now, I think a lot of people are laughing because you can probably relate to some of this. Because I've said some of these lines myself, and I'm like, oh, I should really say that. It's not a great way to earn mutual respect at all and work well together. And so what I want to do share for the first point is actually just 2 practical tips on how engineers and product management can work better together. And the first tip is something like the beer test. You may have heard the beer test. Don't get caught up with whether it's beer or whatever, it's coffee or lunch. But the idea here is you want a relationship with someone you're willing to share a meal with, someone you want to hang out with. And you need to invest time together. And what better way to do this than having a meal together to learn more about each other outside the context of work. And I know this sounds really trivial, but I think as an industry, we definitely undervalue the importance of relationship building between engineers and product. And it's such a, I see lots of heads nodding, which is awesome. It's such a critical ingredient to making those relationships work better together. Now, this is as much as you already got someone in your team and you need to work better together. Let's have a meal together. But this goes as far as hiring, right? Like, we often make sure culture is an important part of our hiring process. Is this someone we could hang out with outside work? What are their interests? Can we work together? Like, how do they think about things in life? Do they fit your culture? And getting engineering involved as part of your PM hiring process is such a critical part of ensuring that you have the right culture fit. So that's one tip there. And Christo here, he's the CEO and founder of TransferWise. And he believes that the product is ultimately an outcome of the people that we hire and the decisions that we make. The people that we hire and the decisions that we make. And if this is really true, then it shows how important we have to focus on our people and the relationship building between our people. He's got a talk. I highly encourage you to check it out. I got a link to some of his tweets and his videos there. It's a great, insightful talk on how people are actually the number one influencer of your product and how you should think about people in relation to your product. So that's one tip there. The second tip I want to talk about is working asynchronously. And I believe we have to learn how to work asynchronously. I don't think this is something that we get naturally. And I was reflecting on this the other day. And my 2-year-old son, this is something that humans we have to learn. My 2-year-old son walks up to me all the time when I'm speaking to someone. He's like, daddy, 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 daddy. And I'm like, one second. We have to learn how to wait or work asynchronously and discuss things either slow or fast, right? Like, we can't always be chatting on top of each other all the time. And so what I wanted to do is give you 3 practical things in which we can work asynchronously together. 3 tips. First one's around how we do discussions. Second one's around how we do status reporting. And the third one is around how we make decisions. So 3 things involved in. And let's go through a few examples on each of those. Discussions here, no surprises. HipChat or whatever chat tool you're using will go a long way to help you communicate asynchronously, right? But I wanted to give you a few tips here on think about when you've got something to share with your engineering team, what do you do? I often ask myself, is this blocking someone from their work today? what I would like to share? Is this blocking someone, or does it help provide more context to what they're working on today? If not, well, great. This is a great candidate for some sort of asynchronous communication. I'll drop it in the room, or I'll drop it in a one-on-one chat. Or is this a nice to have, an FYI? Great, we can use HipChat for that. Another technique that someone told me about that I started doing a few months ago was creating one-on-one rooms either with your engineering manager or whoever it is you work with a lot. And this is not one-on-one chat, but just a room that is for your one-on-ones. And anytime throughout your week something comes up in your mind that you need to discuss with someone, the typical instinct is to go interrupt them and discuss about it. But if it's not time sensitive or can wait a day or two, then I just drop that into the room, or my counterpart engineering manager drops that into the room. And then we meet every Wednesday and we go through that list together. And if they can respond immediately, great, they'll respond. Otherwise, we just wait till Wednesday or whatever it is there. So that's one tip on how to discuss things asynchronously. The second tip is around project status reporting. Who here has to do any sort of status reporting whatsoever? Right, now keep your hands up if you have a meeting for status reports. Okay, almost maybe 3/4 still keep their hands up. Challenge to you guys. How can you end this status meeting? Is there a way you can end the project status meeting? We try to do this in Confluence a lot. So we have these project status pages all the time. They have the list of work that's in flight, who's responsible for it, whatever it is that you want to capture that you have from that meeting. And you try to do that asynchronously. The engineering manager or the project manager will send it out before the meeting, whenever the date is due. And people will fill it out. And the great thing about this is you can link for detail. People outside your team and organization can get some context. You're sharing the knowledge beyond your immediate team, and people can comment and ask questions. Meeting, only one person can speak at a time, and this is a great way to do it asynchronously. Now, some people, I've had some discussions about this, some people still have the meeting as a forcing function or a date to trigger people to fill this out by, and the meetings go super quick. Or some people have just totally managed to cancel their meeting completely once they've built a bit of a discipline to do this. So have a try of just reporting on your projects asynchronously within your engineering or product management teams. Give it a try. It's about making decisions, and this is probably the one I've seen grow the most with our customers, and we actually copied customers doing this ourselves. We like to make decisions asynchronously, and Confluence is great for this, because you can provide a lot of context. You can spend some time thinking about what decision you want to make, discuss some options, flesh it out some more. This is an example of a decision we're making about the upcoming Confluence dashboard. We can put some details in there, some screenshots. We can explore some user stories, present different options. I see this a lot with customers, and we started copying a few of our customers, these options tables. Really great in fleshing out in detail how we can make a decision, what are the pros and cons of each decision that we want to make, and what's the recommendation. Then from there, we have some action items, some discussion, or whatever. Previously, you have to get 6, 7, 8 people in a room. Someone has to present, questions get asked, you're going back and forth. You end up carrying a decision over multiple meetings. And this is a great way to make decisions asynchronously. Now, PMs make decisions, and so do engineers make decisions. And a lot of our engineering team inside Confluence write their own decision pages. They explore a bunch of options, and they do that. And it's a great way to work asynchronously. If you need to set deadlines for decisions, sure, go ahead and set deadlines. But I guess my point here is meetings shouldn't block decisions. And I think far too often we think we have to get 12 people in a room to make a decision. And I think pages help you clearly articulate who's the owner, who are the stakeholders, and who ultimately contributes to this decision in a much clearer way than having a meeting where whoever speaks the loudest maybe has the biggest influence on the meeting. So hire for culture and spend some time building relationships between your product managers and your engineers. And also think about different ways to work asynchronously, whether they be through discussions, your status meetings, see if you can kill your status meeting, challenge to you guys, or make decisions asynchronously. Hopefully some tips there to help you guys work better together. Now, my second tip is actually to involve engineers as late as possible in the life cycle. So this is your typical project plan. You got some idea, research, definition, coding, whatever. And this is the classic rookie mistake. Let's involve engineers here. Ba-bow. Complete waste of time. Engineers, A, don't have time to attend meetings. B, that's what you got hired to do, to talk to customers. And C, they just want to code, right? So what I suggest is instead of doing something like this, maybe modify your project schedule a little bit. You do all the upfront stuff and just get them involved all the way at the end, just before you ship. Right? Wrong. No one ever says something like this. No one says this, right? We laugh at it, but it's true. We end up doing things, and we're like, well, maybe we should involve people earlier. Maybe we shouldn't. I just wish engineers spent more time coding. But the truth is, understanding the problem is 10 times more valuable than your engineering velocity. And it's been widely said that a huge part of building software is not going to be technical. A huge part, the challenges of building software is going to be this building the shared understanding. And I've talked about this before, and I still believe this is the #1 problem that product managers need to solve, is building a shared understanding with our teams. And the way we've typically done this as an industry is we write these things called requirements documents. And for us, they look this way when we write our requirements documents. An engineer reads it, and they're looking at it at a different angle. And we shared understanding, but we completely haven't. We've got it completely wrong. So how do you know if you have understanding? If you were there at the fireside chat last night, the project health monitor got introduced. One of those attributes in a health monitor is, does your team have a shared understanding? So the product management team inside the Confluence team recently tried a really short survey to our engineers. And we wanted to work out, do we have a shared understanding with engineers in the Confluence team? And we asked questions that basically revolved around these three principles: why, who, and what. For the why, we asked questions like, do you know why we're building this? Do you know why the priority of this is so important compared to everything else we're doing on the roadmap? These are simple yes/no questions, right? Or the who stuff. Do you know who we're building this for? Or within our team, do you know who's responsible for what? Or what are you expecting from product management in this team? Or the last one is, what are we doing? What are we aiming for? What does the definition of success look like? What are we not doing? Do you understand this? So we sent a short survey out to the team to see if we do have a shared understanding, and people respond with yeses and nos. And we pick up all the nos and we go, well, we don't have shared understanding in these areas. Let's spend some more time and some more work in these areas. And we have the Agile Manifesto here to help us and guide us on how we build software, right? It's not that the thing at the top is more important than the thing at the bottom. It's when we're forced to make a trade-off decision, the manifesto suggests go for whatever's on top. Example, customer collaborations, probably more important than spending your time negotiating over a contract. If I were to wind back to that manifesto meeting, I don't know how many years ago, if they invited me, they never invited me, I'm a bit cut about that, but let's say if they didn't invite me, I would love to add this to the manifesto: shared understanding over engineering velocity. I do believe this is a huge thing we underestimate in our industry, and ultimately with our goal to build better products. So have a think about how you can build a shared understanding with your team. I've given you some tips on how to identify if you don't have a shared understanding, and I'll talk about in a second on how do you build a shared understanding once you identify a few gaps. So the last tip I want to talk to you about is telling engineers what to build, not the why to build it, right? And if you do tell them this, don't tell them details, they hate details, right? Just keep it high level, super high level. I like to keep it high level to the point where they kind of understand the level of thinking that I'm after, right? So, I even draw UML diagrams for them. Here is a user. We want them to press some buttons, and then we're going to make money, right? just make money, right? This is where I add value. I tell you how this works, right? Or user stories are great for telling engineers exactly what you want built. Just write it in this format. You say, as a user, don't worry about the user. I want to tell them the solution that you're after, and just say the solution again. They'll usually get it the second time. No, completely wrong. And in fact, with the example with user stories, I think as an industry, we've completely destroyed them. We've absolutely destroyed user stories. And we've taken what is supposed to be something like this. As Alana, where me and you have a shared understanding of who Alana is, and we've interviewed Alanas together, and we know their attributes, and we know how they think, and we have empathy with someone like Alana. And we write, what their intent is. What are they trying to do? And the last one is, why are they doing it? What value do they get out of it? But it's so easy to just fall back to this as a user thing and back to prescribing solutions, because that is the easier thing to do, rather than abstracting out to what the actual user's intent is. And I think Jeff Patton sums this up really, really well. He says user stories get the name from how they should be told, not what should be written. how they should be told, not what they should be written. And I've plugged this book before, but it's an excellent book called Story Mapping, which I highly recommend if you want to learn more about how he's thinking about fixing the user story problem. So what do you do about this? Maybe am I saying we don't write user stories or we don't write requirements? No, not at all. I guess what I'd like to suggest is, as product teams, our job working engineering teams is to build a story toolbox, a set of tools and techniques to help us tell stories. That is our primary job, right? We need to tell stories. And what goes in this toolbox is a ton of different things. These are some of the things that are in our toolbox at Atlassian. Contextual inquiry, story mapping, requirements documents are there as well, right? Journey maps, prototypes, etc. But I think as an industry, what we often do is go for the requirements document because that's how we've always done it. And that's the standard process, whatever standard means. And we think that's the best way of doing things, and it's not. We need to understand what problem do we have in front of us and what's the best way to articulate that problem. Now, in this talk, I would have loved to spend another 10 minutes talking about some of these as examples. I don't have time, but there's a link there to another talk that I've given that actually goes through maybe 5 of these in a bit more detail and how we do them at Atlassian, bit.ly/story toolbox. So check it out, and you can learn more about some of them. But I guess this toolbox, what do we do? Let's apply this toolbox to some examples, right? So classic thing, you run some analytics. I'm going to pick some qualitative and quantitative things out of my toolbox, right? You run some analytics, and you find out feature X is not used. That's great. Analytics always tells us the what. They never, ever, ever tell us the why, right? Not much we can do here. Now, stop for a second. What our industry does today is we write 30, 40, 50 different experiments and throw things out there and see which one works to solve this problem. This is a method of trial and error. This can be a valid method, but I don't think trial and error is the most efficient way to do anything in life, is it? It's not really the most efficient way to do anything in life. So that's where our toolbox comes in. How best do we answer the why here? All right, so we do some user testing. We pick up the phone. We talk to customers. We say, OK, they kind of get the feeling the user experience is confusing. Or we do some more analytics and find out that actually the feature, that's not that the feature is not used. It is used, but it's got a low adoption, so it's not used by a lot of people, right? Or you talk to your support team, and they say it's buggy. You're like, that's not really helpful to tell me it's buggy, but they say it's buggy, right? It's a start, right? OK, well, let's pull out some of those more qualitative and quantitative techniques that we have in our toolbox to find out why. We do some more user testing, or some more interviews, and we find out, hey, they get lost in the flow, or they find it hard to get started, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea here. Some people call this the 5 whys, whatever it is. But the 5 whys is not just asking why 5 times. It's actually just doing a whole bunch of different techniques to actually get to the heart of the problem, right? And eventually we get to a point where we actually get to what are the actual problems that people are facing when we say the feature is not used. And then we can devise a whole bunch of solutions to that problem. So we may do some interviews, some surveys, things that you have in your toolbox, and you need to be building your toolbox to answer some of these things. And what this helps you do is you'll eventually get a list of problems that relate to your epic or your main problem, right? What looks like often, you've all worked in product, right? You have something in your roadmap, and you're like, oh, that's one feature. It should be easy to do. When you start researching it, you realize there's 40, 50, 60 different things you could actually do to that feature. But a technique like this helps your team get aligned on what you're doing now, what you're doing next. This all relate to the same problem, right? And what we're not doing. So it's really helpful in clarifying your roadmaps and how you're going to solve a particular problem and what aspects of that problem are you going to solve. So tell stories, not requirements. Really, this is hard to do. But I think over time, as you build more and more techniques in your toolbox, this will become far easier. Focus on the why. I think this is pretty obvious, not the what. And I think it's just very easy for us to do the what. And from us as product managers, we often hear from our customers, and they often tell us, what do they tell us? They tell us the solutions, not the problems, right? Like I've spoken to some of our customers today, and they tell me, I'd love a button to do X. And that doesn't tell me actually too much about their problem. So we sit there and we have a good conversation about, what are you trying to do? When do you want to use this button? What context do you use it in? This takes time, right? And I think far too often as an industry, we disagree and debate solutions. We rarely fight over the problems. We spend forever with our teams fighting over solutions, but we never fight over the actual problems and actually rip the problem apart to work out which problem do we want to solve? So I hope I've given you some tips there on working better together. We've talked about building culture and relationships and spending time together, as well as hiring. We've talked about different tips and techniques to work asynchronously, whether it be from chat to decisions to maybe hopefully killing your project status meeting. Involving engineers early so they can be involved in the thought process and have that shared understanding that's really important to have with your team. Please think about how you're building up your toolbox for whatever it is you need to do to tell your stories. Often customers tell me, what do you do for requirements? And I'm like, well, no. What do we do to tell customer stories? And there's this need that we feel like we have to standardize on the way we do requirements. And that's certainly not the case. And spend time thinking about the what and not the why. That's it for me. Thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it.
Sherif, thanks so much. We have a couple minutes for Q&A. I do have one question here. If you want to send your questions through, send them through the app now, and we can answer a couple questions. The first question, how can we build relationships to pass the lunch test with people that work remotely?
Oh, that is a hard question. I'm just trying to think of how we do with our remote engineers. Ryan, we work remotely. How do we pass the lunch test? There is a lot of soft culture stuff that happens with your team. So I guess I'll use some examples at Atlassian and see how you can draw some parallels with how you work. We have a blogging culture internally, and people share blogs. They share blogs that are both work-related, and a lot of people share non-work-related stuff. Like someone posted a blog yesterday about some recipe of how they made this beautiful avocado sandwich in the kitchen in level 7. But that kind of stuff also helps with the culture building. So I guess we've kind of got social networks to help us do that. This is obviously dependent on your work culture and the budgets that you have. At Atlassian, we have offices all around the world. We had opened an office in Saigon a few months ago. Our engineering manager, which was just amazing and awesome to see, mandated that in any given month, we had 2 people from Saigon in Sydney and 2 people from Sydney in Saigon, and constant rotation. Now, this comes obviously at a financial cost, but hands down, it was amazing to help build that bridge between engineering and product management, or even engineering and engineering. Obviously, that comes at a cost, but there's probably a bunch of different techniques. Maybe other people have ideas on how to solve it.
Yeah, our team's distributed, and I think we leave about 10 minutes in the beginning of a lot of meetings to just banter.
Right.
Back and forth, and it's not all 60 minutes or 30 minutes of the meeting are scheduled on an agenda. It's usually we have 10 minutes of banter that usually kind of works well, and HipChat's really great too. Here's a question: who buys the beer?
Who buys the? If you're interviewing someone, you buy the beer. You never get them to buy the beer. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question.
I think that's good enough.
You know what? I would answer it by product. I would actually say product. That's the mentality I think we should have. We should be serving our teams, not them serving us. So I think it probably has a huge part to do with that.
We have 2 more questions. Anyone want to raise their hand? I can bring the microphone. Anybody have a quick question? Otherwise, we can wrap it up. Oh, got one way down here.
Do you have any suggestions in trying to harbor this kind of environment in a regulated industry where documentation and rigidity is like the norm and unfortunately the expectation?
I'd love to say I would, but I can't. I haven't worked in that industry, so I actually can't comment about it. Maybe if there's other people that have experiences in those areas, you could come to the side here and help this lady out. Yeah, I'd be making stuff up if I tried to answer that question. So I'm good at making stuff up, but yeah, sorry, no idea there.
We got time for one more. Anybody?
One over here, Ryan.
I can say it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll repeat it.
What's your favorite problem that you've solved?
Wow. The question was, what's your favorite problem that you've solved? That's a good question. The best problems that I guess got the most satisfaction with a team working on are the problems that customers didn't know they had. And I'll give you an example. All of you use Confluence. I guess the majority of you use Confluence, right? So like, you can put tasks in pages in Confluence, right? You know those little checkboxes. That sounds pretty standard now, and you're kind of used to it. But 4 years ago, when we introduced that, no one asked us for tasks in pages, right? And through both mostly qualitative research techniques, we'd sit in meetings with customers. And don't forget that not a lot of tools in the market had tasks and content. So this was not something where like, hey, look at them, they're doing it, let's do this. And I remember sitting with Edu, actually, he's one of our engineers, and we were interviewing this customer. And they had some meeting notes or a decision up, I can't remember. And they were using just emoticons to look like an emoticon list. And we're like, why is that person using stars instead of like list items? And we thought it was like really funny. We're like, why are they doing that? And then they started coloring their stars. There was a red star and a green star. And we're like, PM and you ask why, whatever. Oh, they're just tasks. I changed the red stars to green stars when they're complete. And we're like, well, we should just let them put tasks in pages, right? And no one ever asked us for that, but I guess it's a simple example of like making someone's life a little bit easier from just observing their data behaviors. You're never going to get that from analytics, right? We're taught today to sit behind consoles and A/B test the hell out of everything. You can't beat that qualitative feedback, right? Hands down. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. It wasn't the easiest feature to implement. It took like 4 months or 6 months or something. Yeah, but it was good.
Great. Sherif, thank you so much.
Cool, thanks.